Story 1. I find myself very emotional with my husband and children. My kids will never know what it is like to cry alone in their rooms when all they want is a hug. Story 2. Repeated patterns. Married an emotionally distant man, perfectionism to gain attention, which does not work. And I developed my own negative trait, alcoholism. I am 6 months sober and working on other aspects of my life. Story 3. My first relationship was a disaster because of that. I never hugged other people until I was 20, only shaking hands. Multiple people told me I seem autistic, but I am pretty sure it is something I picked up because my mother told me at 13 that I was bad at hugging. So I did not hug anyone, and now if I do, people tell me I do it weirdly. Of course, because it feels weird to me. In my current relationship, I cannot get close enough to my boyfriend. If I know my friends well enough, I do not have a problem hugging them anymore. Story 4. My parents were great but not affectionate. I don't think my father ever told me he loves me. I know he does, and I am okay with that. My mother now overuses the phrase, almost as if to make up for not saying it before. They were not huggers either. I think it was a cultural thing. No one I knew was particularly affectionate. When I moved to the United States from the United Kingdom, I noticed all my American family members were very affectionate. Over time, I have become affectionate as well. It took years to be comfortable with hugs, kisses, and especially saying, "I love you." I have never doubted my parents' love for me. I just know better than to go to them when I need to hear it. Story 5. Introverted, detached from society, always feeling out of place in groups, unable to form connections. But honestly, I do not know if that is the cause or the reason. I might have been defective to begin with. Story 6. And now I get blamed for somehow being both unemotional and too emotional. It just depends on my mother's mood, apparently. Story 7. My parents taught me many important skills that other kids' parents did not, such as how to do my taxes, balance a checkbook, do my laundry, and cook. These skills helped me become responsible and manage money well. However, I grew up emotionally neglected. As a result, I have avoidant attachment. I have very few close friends, and it feels unnatural to be affectionate with anyone other than my partner. I do not like giving hugs and physically recoil when strangers touch me. I have even reacted violently to being touched without consent. Story 8. I don't really like being touched, like my arms and back, except by my husband. Anyone else, please do not touch me. Story 9. I looked for affection somewhere else. I ended up with sexually abusive men, one of whom is a broadcaster you still see on television now. It was the most horrible relationship. It left me scarred and broken. He is a predator. That is why parents should make sure you are the first people your children run to for anything, not someone they are scared of in case something goes wrong. Story 10. It taught me that no one cares about my feelings, and that I should not even bother expressing them. I also used to get made fun of for being highly expressive before I shut off my emotional expression. There was a lot of discouragement surrounding emotions when I was growing up. I am very stoic now and do not know how to remove that mask. It feels like it is superglued to my face, even though I can still feel that expressive, enthusiastic person locked away inside my head. Affection in general, especially physical affection, feels really weird, awkward, and abnormal for me. I am not great at expressing affection, even if I feel it. I am also not great at receiving affection, though honestly, receiving affection is not something that happens very often, even now. It seems like some people are born with a sign over them that says, "Do not care about this person," and it starts with the parents. Story 11. I cringe when I have to be affectionate, whether with words or physical affection, and it is awful because it shows. Friends have told me I give weird, forced hugs. The only affection I can show is sexual, but not the family or friends type. Also, whenever my boyfriend gives me some kind of affection, I automatically translate it as sexual and get aroused or reject it. Too much information? Story 12. I am not emotionally vulnerable until I really trust someone, often years into friendships. I do not like hugs or people generally touching me. I am, however, overly emotional with my own children and husband. I gush over my children and tell them and my husband that I love them multiple times a day. Story 13. My parents were never affectionate. We barely even hugged. I had a good, stable childhood with everything I needed. But I am just now, as an adult, realizing the effects that it had. I am not saying my parents did anything wrong. I think they are great parents, and I had a wonderful childhood. However, I can see how it has affected my relationships as an adult. Story 14. Yes. I have anxiety and low self-esteem. I do not know if it is definitely cause and effect. I love receiving affection and give it to my wife and daughter abundantly. Story 15. Yes. I am overly affectionate and eager to please people I care about. I have no doubt they find it odd at times. I was an alcoholic for about 8 years. Story 16. My parents were never affectionate and never told me they loved me, but I really did not care. I never even thought about it until my sister brought it up and felt like it affected her negatively. I am exactly the opposite with my kids. I hug them and tell them I love them every time I talk to them. I treat my grandchildren the same way. They know I adore them. Story 17. I would have been fine without the affection if there had also been love. But there was neither. I am not going to hurt my own feelings by going through all it has cost me and the impact on my mental and physical health, but it has been considerable. As an adult, I am proud that I treat people with empathy and that I raised my own children with care and affection. Now I am a grandmother. My older son is a sweet and engaged father, and my younger son is the fun uncle and is basically my granddaughter's favorite person. She knows she is loved, and while I still have trauma from my childhood, I know I broke the curse. Story 18. That sounds like the average family, at least from the people I know. I heard my parents say, "I love you," once and saw them kiss once. We didn't hug or show any affection, but we laughed and joked. I think my dad's death was when my immediate family started saying, "I love you," when we got off the phone. It's still strange sometimes hearing it from them. I've had plenty of serious relationships and have learned to be more affectionate over the years. But I don't think people who are less affectionate lack love. My family showed our love through our actions. We didn't need verbal confirmation or continuous verbal confirmation to feel loved. Story 19. My parents were alcoholics and showed affection by beating each other. My brother was a drug addict and passed away in February. I am anxiety-ridden and spiral over the smallest things. My little brother is doing well, though. He is a proud father of 3 and has another child on the way. Story 20. Father was an alcoholic who liked to hit my mother. He died when I was 8 and left me with her. She loved me enough not to abandon me, but unfortunately never gave me the love I deserved as a child because I looked a lot like him. To cope with my loneliness, I spent a lot of time with my neighbor's child, who became my best friend and is now my boyfriend. How does it affect me now? I have attachment issues and constantly seek attention and approval from everyone around me. To all parents out there, please leave your children out of your problems. They do not want this. You are the one who brought them into this world, and the last thing they want is to be caught between their parents' issues. Story 21. On the 17th, my mom pinched me on the cheeks and smiled at me. A couple of days ago, I do not even remember the exact day. I was surprised and kind of afraid. She had a tough life, not very affectionate, but I love her. May God bless her. Story 22. Narcissistic unmarried Irish mother. Father was absent. Cannot take a compliment. Husband has been trying for 30 years to undo the damage that woman caused. I always put myself down before anyone else can and have never felt pretty. Story 23. Mine were Africans, so saying "I love you" is unusual. They showed love differently, but this lovey-dovey stuff still leaves me confused. What am I supposed to say in some situations except look and stay quiet? Story 24. Parents were divorced, and my mom didn't like hugging me except in rare circumstances, while my dad wanted to hug me constantly to make himself feel better. I crave affection from specific people I like or feel close to, do not like being touched by others, and am highly aware that touching others can cause discomfort. Even though I crave contact, I rarely initiate or ask for it out of fear that I will make the other person as uncomfortable as others have made me. It's exhausting. Story 25. We were a unique family. We used teasing sarcasm instead of actual emotional words. No expressions of love or similar words of affection. There was no hugging either, but then again, 5 out of the 6 people in the household were on the autism spectrum disorder. My late wife, the first night we spent as guests at my parents' house, was understandably confused. She was very emotional and affectionate. She told me that my dad teased her a lot, withholding the TV remote and being jokingly sarcastic. I smiled at her and explained that the more my dad teased you, the more he liked you. The more polite and correct he was, the more he disliked the person in front of him. Unsurprisingly, I am a sarcastic type of person now, but I am also caring. I like helping and taking care of people. Just don't hug me casually. Story 26. I didn't know any better while growing up, but now I know it's not normal for kids to cry themselves to sleep, feel uncomfortable telling their parents they are sick, or feel like they have to solve everything on their own. When I entered my first long-term relationship, I realized I needed more, but had no experience regulating those emotions. For 3 years, I believed I was bipolar, and that relationship was a complete mess. Now, I'm engaged to the most loving man who taught me how to express myself in a healthy way. I'm still learning and very anxious about these wedding vows. I still struggle to tell people, other than my fiancé, how I'm feeling. It's still weird to say I love you or hug my parents. I do have social anxiety and people-pleasing issues, but we're getting there. Story 27. I made sure my own children heard, I love you every day, often multiple times. I also gave them lots of hugs and read books to them snuggled in bed. They know they are loved in word and deed. Story 28. To clarify, I am referring to objectively good parents. However, they just are not or were not affectionate people. For example, my parents and I have never exchanged I love yous when about to end a phone call. In fact, the first time I heard my best friend tell his mother he loves her when hanging up a call, I thought it was the strangest thing ever. Story 29. My parents were affectionate people, but I was never that way. Being hugged makes my skin crawl. It was only after being married and having 2 children, one of whom is autistic, that I powered through that feeling for their sake. Story 30. Not affection but kind of related, arguing. My parents were wonderful in almost everything, but they decided never to argue in front of the children. If they needed to have an argument, they would go for a drive, a walk, or something to take it out of the house. Growing up, it was pretty idyllic. But now that I am an adult, I have found that I lack positive conflict resolution skills, and even minor confrontations make me very anxious. Story 31. I do not know, but I cannot say for sure about my relationship with them because we were not used to hearing phrases like, good morning, good night, I love you, or thank you. 30 years later, it was still difficult to even say these words in texts. I managed to break the ice with good morning 4 years ago. Story 32. My parents were 2 types. My father was emotionally distant. I think he was autistic. My mother was toxic. 1 minute she was hugging me, and the next she was yelling abuse at me and saying things no teenager should hear. I have grown up struggling to express emotion. I am also autistic. I get frightened when someone raises their voice as a fright response. I am hypervigilant of my surroundings. I struggle to say I love you because I am afraid of getting hurt, so I don't express much to avoid being hurt. I have anxiety, depression, and sleep issues. I am an introvert, but if I go out with friends, I can drink a lot until I lose inhibitions. It is not great. I have a new relationship of 9 months, and he tells me I am hard to read. We had a discussion recently about how we would feel if the other person ended the relationship. He said he would be upset but would accept it. I told him I would just go back to being single with my cat, and life would move on because I am used to being single. I realized that I literally would just not care. Maybe that is the introvert with autism side. Perhaps if it happened, that might not be true, but my partner was surprised. Story 33. I have never doubted my parents' love and support for me. They have been fantastic parents and have always looked out for me. However, we are an Asian family and are not affectionate. My parents are both practical and stoic people, and I am pretty much the same. Love was never talked about. Hugs were extremely rare. As an adult, I am fiercely independent and have difficulty accepting help from others. I feel like asking for love, praise, or assistance is burdening other people, so I should manage on my own. I bottle up any negative feelings. I am slowly working on undoing some of these thought processes, but it is difficult. Story 34. My dad was affectionate and my mom was very strict. It was a good balance until I lost my dad when I was 13. I had a difficult teenage years with a lot of depression. But I am 26 now, and I am stronger than ever. Emotionally stable, I cannot always express how I feel, but I can listen to my friends, and they often seek my advice. Despite being an adult myself, I still wish I had an adult I could rely on sometimes because life can be overwhelming at times. My mom and I have a good relationship now, but it was not always that way growing up. She was not a bad parent. She was just a scared single parent in a society that judges every single move a woman makes. She did her best. Story 35. My parents never told me they loved me. I kind of knew they did, but it hurt a little. My dad and I now say we love each other frequently, and that is great. My mom and I only say it on cards, and that is sad. I tell my friends I love them often. I think I am okay with it now. Story 36. I have been waiting for this one. The last time I cuddled with any parent was maybe age 7. I got pushed off my mom because she was too hot, but just the way she did it, something clicked in my brain and I was never physically affectionate with her again. I was never affectionate with my dad either. I remember after age 10, the I love yous stopped being a regular thing and were rarely said until I shipped off to basic training. Then it became maybe a yearly thing. My parents never felt like safe people I could talk to as a kid of any age. I didn't trust them with sensitive or embarrassing things at all, whether it was advice on a boy, friendships, work, or school. So my friends and I essentially raised me on the emotional front. It went about as well as you'd expect, but I'm normalish now. Living with them was like living with roommates in many ways. They bought me what I needed. They were never physically abusive aside from attempts at spanking when I was little, which stopped when I was about 5. Not verbally abusive either, although there were a few major mistakes on their part that really drove home why I didn't and couldn't trust them, especially my mom, with how they spoke to me about deeply important things. For example, the first breakup when I was 12. I was crying and told my mom I loved him, and she coldly said, "No, you don't," like my feelings weren't real just because I was 12. Another time, when I had been sexually assaulted at age 16. The following day, I was moody for some reason, and my mom asked, "What is wrong with you?" Another big mistake they made was never telling me about themselves, their childhood or early years, and never asking me about myself or sharing in my interests. My dad was an artist on the side and a handyman but never showed me how to paint or build, even though I was always trying. Now to cut to the chase. I'm an adult with kids, and I cuddle them a lot. When I don't want to be affectionate, I word it carefully so they don't feel it's because of them. When I'm too hot, I say, "Hey kiddo, I'm really sweaty. Can you just sit next to me and lean on me for now?" When my kids are emotional, I say, "It's okay for you to be angry about this, but it's not okay to slam doors and scream. There are other people in the house and neighbors on that wall, so we need to be respectful even when we're angry." When I see my kids having a hard time, I gently talk to them and try to help or encourage them to talk to me about their struggles. They do, and it feels so good. My kids are also both interested in art. I think they got the gene, and I love doing arts and crafts with them and painting side by side. I can't believe my dad never did that with me. Even when I was entering competitions and being recognized at every school I attended for my art by the teachers there. Wild. I'm very affectionate with my husband, but I have an extremely hard time making friends. In elementary school, I was very social, but by the end of middle school, that part of me had gone away, and I never made a lasting friendship after age 10. I made friends, yes, but as soon as I moved, those friendships ended. My parents moved us a lot when I was a kid, about every 2 to 3 years for no reason, but during the first 11 years, I stayed in the same school district, then middle school in another district, then back to my original school for 1 year, then out of state for high school starting mid-ninth grade. A nightmare. My relationship with my parents has never been close or like a friendship as an adult. I tried harder to incorporate them into my life as a young adult, but as I got into my mid-20s and my kids were getting older, I just stopped coming around as often. Going to their house was always like going to a coworker's house. It never felt like home. Especially after 2016, it was constant walking on eggshells and having to watch what I said, while my dad could say whatever he wanted. Now that I think about it, it didn't feel like home even as a kid unless they were out of the house and I was alone. Seriously, it was like living with neighbors or roommates. I wasn't truly comfortable with them ever. Wild. In summary, my parents were stoic roommates my whole life. I'd say I'm socially awkward or quiet, but I get along with everyone in my life easily. I just can't seem to make friends because I assume I'm bothering anyone I would reach out to. My husband is my best friend, and I tell my kids I love them often because I didn't get that as a kid. Story 37. I grew up thinking that the only type of love and affection that existed was romantic and sexual, and sought that out starting in elementary school. Once I was in high school and got a serious boyfriend, I pretty much abandoned all my friendships. My boyfriend was extremely manipulative and emotionally abusive, and I had no one to turn to and no examples of healthy relationships. So I stayed with him until I was 21. I jumped from him to another, and then another with short breaks in between where I was very promiscuous. I settled down with my current partner, who is better than previous ones but not great. Unfortunately, I did not realize I needed to leave until we had a baby together. Now I am 35, trying to earn enough money to get out of this relationship and mostly failing. My only saving grace is that I have started putting effort into friendships and have found some amazing women with whom I am creating strong and healthy bonds. Every day I show my daughter the affection I was never shown. I hug her, cuddle with her, and tell her I love her a million times a day. I have many shortcomings as a mother, but this is one area where I feel I am breaking the cycle. Story 38. They received no affection, only abuse, so I struggled for a while. I am doing better now. I have a good therapist and will be going low contact with them soon. Story 39. People say I am depressing to talk to or be around, and I drink alcohol every waking moment of my life. Story 40. My family did not touch. You only said I love you on rare special occasions. I was born 6 weeks premature, spent 4 weeks in an incubator, and then several more weeks in the hospital with spinal meningitis. So I know I was barely touched after birth. If you touch me and I am not expecting it, I jump like a cat. My mental health is tenuous. I hug my kids and tell them that I love them every day. Story 41. My parents did not show me much affection. I am the middle child. I am much more introverted than my siblings and can be quieter as well. I find myself giving more than I receive to prove that I am worth the effort. I have been taken advantage of because of my kindness. Story 42. I am affectionate and loving with my daughter. I strive to make sure she knows she is loved. I am not very affectionate with anyone else, and this probably will not change. Story 43. Never even saw my parents kiss. I once saw my mom hold my dad's hand when he died when I was 10. My entire family, both mom's and dad's side, were like that. Cousins included. I was adopted and the affectionate one of the family. I was always made fun of for it, so I eventually shut it down. I have trouble putting my emotions into words and feel really weird when friends or my husband's family try to hug or give me a peck on the cheek. I do not do public displays of affection with my husband. Any public display gives me instant anxiety. At home, things are very different. My kids are 14 and 18, and I still hug them and give them a kiss on their heads at least every day. Even when they leave the room, I tell them I love them. I tell them funny stories about when they were little and reminisce with them over old pictures. My husband and I have been married over 10 years and are still very affectionate with each other. We always give a hug and kiss when leaving or arriving home. It is more natural now, but I was determined that my kids would not live in a house devoid of emotion and affection. Story 44. My parents were definitely not affectionate. There is one thing I do, or should I say do not do, with partners. I literally forget to be affectionate. When my ex and I parted ways, I felt sad and lonely and thought to myself, I could have literally hugged them whenever I wanted. I could have held their hand or given them a kiss. I could have done that. I tell you, those things never crossed my mind. Like, Ever. I do not dislike affection, I just completely forget to show it. Not sure if that is all linked together or not. Story 45. Either constantly seeking and requiring validation from my loved ones and close friends or being extremely guarded and private with acquaintances. Story 46. Anxiety and discomfort with platonic physical intimacy made me determined to have children who knew a hug was always available and who heard, "I love you," every single day. Story 47. Before I was born, neither of my parents were big on physical affection. Somehow, I came out of the womb incredibly tactile and clingy. I wanted to hug and be hugged all the time. It's just who I am, born that way. The problem was that my parents were not like that with my older siblings. I did not know until I was an adult that they resented me for it. They thought our parents loved me more because they hugged me more. Story 48. Wenn man vom eigenen Vater als erbärmliche Kreatur bezeichnet wird und ein Jahrzehnt Prügel erhält, die eigentlich der Mutter gelten, um sie zu schützen, darf man seinen Senf dazu geben. Das Gute ist, wer das durchsteht, entwickelt Resilienz und einen starken Charakter. Auch ein Gefühl für Gefahr. Schließlich war man innerlich jahrelang auf der Flucht. Das Schlechte ist, dass es der Gesundheit nicht förderlich ist. Man sieht die Welt mit anderen Augen und wird schnell ein Einzelgänger. Da man Schmerzen kennt, habe ich mich zu sehr um die Probleme anderer gekümmert und deren Wohlbefinden über mein eigenes gestellt. Es fehlt gewaltig an Urvertrauen. Man arbeitet eigentlich beständig am eigenen Selbstwert und analysiert sowie hinterfragt Dinge, die für andere selbstverständlich sind. Im Grunde muss man sich seinen inneren Schatten stellen, sie akzeptieren, anerkennen und dann lernen, sie lieb zu haben bzw. in sein Leben zu integrieren, anstatt den Schmerz zu verdrängen oder zu versuchen, einen schnellen Ausweg durch Drogen zu nehmen. Das funktioniert nicht. Die Aufgabe liegt nur wieder vor einem und ist etwas schwerer. Story 49. As someone who grew up with a mother who did not hug, it made me the same way. I do not understand the significance of hugging or how it is comforting. If anything, they can just start choking you in the middle of a hug or squeeze your arms so tightly that you cannot move. Story 50. I grew up with parents who divorced when I was 4. I was not short on affection but lacked an example of what a couple or family looks like. Story 51. I grew up with a caring mother, but everyone else in my immediate family is difficult. My aunt and 2 cousins are insufferable, my father is very irresponsible, and my grandmother is the most unpleasant person I have ever known. Without these people, I would be less grumpy, more caring, and more affectionate. However, interacting with them constantly took a toll on my patience and tolerance. Story 52. Lack of parental affection in childhood can affect self-worth and emotional regulation later in life. Personally, I had to relearn how to feel safe expressing love or even receiving it. Story 53. Anxiety, low self-esteem, fear of being alone. I cannot think of big goals because I believe I will fail, so I do not take risks. Story 54. One incident of bullying in high school led to my severe anxiety, which was already high due to being on the autism spectrum. It also escalated my overthinking. I almost ended my life in 2020. Story 55. I get uncomfortable when people hug to say goodbye. It feels like they just kissed your dad on the mouth in front of me. I do not want any part in that. Story 56. I have grown to be pretty independent. I can take care of myself financially and with homemaking. However, I have strong avoidant traits, especially in romantic relationships. Their relationship still affects me to this day because of secrets I discovered about both of them that I have kept to myself for decades. They have given me and my brother a lot of love in their own way. Sometimes, I think it is best for me to stay single just to support my mother. I cannot imagine her spending the rest of her life with my father alone. Story 57. It taught me to be distant and awkward with closeness, to have unmet emotional needs, and to lack love and support. These are the I put food on the table types who think that is all they need to do for their children. Nothing more. Story 58. It was not until my early 20s that I learned to hug people properly with open palms and not closed fists. I still do not like hugs now as an adult. You search for signs of approval in other ways, for example, perfectionism in every task I do, which is largely unachievable. For a long time, it was the only outward sign my parents were proud of me if I succeeded in school, college, or university. The constant craving for a warm, motherly figure to show you unconditional love or outward signs of support when you go through a rough time causes feelings of jealousy or longing when you see people who have someone like that in their life. There is constant anxiety and worry about getting in trouble or being told off because, to a perfectionist, it is the worst possible feeling to fail or do something wrong. Having to live life by the rules for every little thing because, again, being told off for doing something wrong when you do not receive any other affection feels like another blow. Never being comfortable with vulnerability because you were never able to be vulnerable as a child, so it feels foreign to you. Accepting poor behavior from partners or other people because you never experienced an outward display of affection, so you get used to people being cold to you. The list can be endless. Story 59. Low self-confidence and anxiety. However, it also showed me that is not how I want to parent my own children. It has helped me break the generational trauma carried by my family. Story 60. My parents never showed affection to one another. I was the firstborn, and my mother said I was not a cuddly baby, whereas my sister was very cuddly with my mother. I do not know if my lack of cuddliness is nature, nurture, or both. Either way, I think I am a cat now. Story 61. It did not affect me. I just do not need affection, help, support, or closeness. Story 62. I never knew how to express emotions. I seem cold, indifferent, or rude. This does not attract normal people, only abnormal ones. Story 63. My parents were emotionally unavailable narcissists who couldn't handle my sister and me being neurodivergent. We learned very quickly that we would be punished or reprimanded for the most innocuous things. We had to walk on eggshells to avoid triggering an emotional response from our mother. And in the end, we learned that we could not rely on them for any comfort. My parents also subconsciously showed me that there was no tolerance for any difficulties caused by my disability. If I asked for help, I was made to feel lazy, like a failure, and like a burden. As an adult, I had to manage getting my own diagnosis for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and deal with all the challenges that come with it. I am hyper-independent, have an anxious attachment style, but am also very avoidant, do not know how to manage my own emotions, and have a damaged inner child who just wants someone to tell him they are proud of him and will support him no matter how many times he fails. I realized that the type of romantic love I am seeking is essentially the affection I never received as a child. I am trying to deal with that while also being chronically alone and single. I am also a borderline alcoholic. So great job, Mom and Dad. Story 64. I struggle to express how I am feeling. I hug my son all the time. My former partners would say I am cold. My mother recently attended a workshop where they teach you how to hug properly for a long time. Now, every time I see her, she hugs me like that, and it feels awkward. Part of me resents that it took her 32 years to learn this. First, it was like hugging a shark. Story 65. Yes, it is hard for me to be openly affectionate with my wife, who suffers from it. I try but constantly fall back to my default mode. Story 66. I'm never affectionate. I basically don't know how to be, although I'm getting better. I avoid any type of contact with anyone, probably because it feels familiar or due to fear of rejection. You can't get rejected if you just stay away. I had problems with alcohol and drugs for many years. Story 67. I never ask for help. I never said I love you until my girlfriend started complaining. I don't like being touched. I don't like showing affection in public. I like to be alone too much. Feels strange hugging people. I am working on hugging my friends more, but I can't do it with family because it feels too awkward. Story 68. I feel like a recluse most of the time. I struggle with depression and anxiety, feeling unloved, and making connections with people in general. I also think I am a people pleaser because of this. Story 69. Yes, it was devastating. These books have helped me grow past much of that devastation. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents, 2015, by Lindsay Gibson. Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. From Surviving to Thriving, 2018, by Pete Walker. Story 70. Anxious avoidant attachment style. My mom was also straightforwardly mocking and belittling. The combination of lack of affection and mistreatment has made finding a partner very hard. At first, I am aloof and act disinterested to avoid getting hurt. Once someone breaks through that, I become overly attached and terrified they will abandon me. I have scared away many partners, which I only accepted this year after 20 years of adulthood. Thanks, Mother. Story 71. Yes, no hugs, no communication. Just do as I say or I will beat you with a belt or whatever I can get my hands on to hit you. I have depression, lack of trust, and become more antisocial every year. I do not know if it is their fault, just bad luck, or genetics. Story 72. I am basically only comfortable with affection from my significant other. Otherwise, I am normal enough for a neurodivergent chaos goblin. I can take people or leave them, but I have very long-term friends and no patience for toxicity. Story 73. Being affectionate makes me cringe. Hearing sweet words from friends or boyfriends makes my skin crawl. They always say I am cold or indifferent. I do not know how to comfort people, especially when they cry. When a family member, relative, or friend dies, I am often asked, "Why aren't you sad?" When my father died, even the doctor told me, "I would not have known you were his daughter. You are very calm. I have never seen someone react like you do." They usually break down and cry. I was a bit annoyed as to why she found the need to tell me that. Later, my mother was suddenly screaming at me, "Why aren't you crying? Your father is dead. Do you not have a heart?" I was too stunned to react. What was I supposed to do? Fake cry? I did not feel anything. Everyone dies at some point. Story 74. Until I was about 30, I did not know I was different from everyone else. Once I noticed the differences, I made many changes and now have a completely different perspective on life. Story 75. Well, even in my 40s, I have no innate sense of self-worth. I managed to quit heroin and amphetamines, but I've been addicted to cocaine, crack, and alcohol since I was 15. I don't trust people, and I struggle to accept that people might love me. I spent most of my teenage years in my room getting high, listening to music, playing guitar, and cutting myself. When I wasn't in my room, I was mostly getting high in the park after dark, writhing on the floor with my equally unstable girlfriend, getting in fights, and getting kicked out of school. Thankfully, I became pretty good at guitar and was able to make a meager living from it for 5 or 6 years. That at least helped me imagine that maybe I wasn't completely useless. I went back into education after my music career became non-viable. I got a degree, then went to graduate school and earned a master's. I enjoyed what I studied, and it helped me manage my heroin addiction and be more disciplined with my usage. A couple of years later, I quit heroin. Then I ended up in the technology industry and could finally afford large amounts of really good quality cocaine. I no longer work in technology but can still afford cocaine. I'm working on an album. It will suck, and I hope you never hear it. Story 76. Yes, my father was not very affectionate. It affected me in profound ways, such as low confidence, anxiety, low self-worth and self-esteem, and not believing in myself. I have done a lot of therapy and internal work on it, but it has definitely been challenging. Story 77. I became disconnected from my parents' cultures except for the food and some customs and festivities. I mostly dated men outside of my father's culture and barely speak or understand their mother tongues. Story 78. Whenever I hit rock bottom, I would isolate because I did not know how to be vulnerable around others. It never felt safe. I still struggle with asking for help, receiving affection, or believing people care without me earning it first. Story 79. My father was not like that largely because of his own upbringing. When he was dying of Alzheimer's disease, it was hard to be very close. However, I told him several times that I loved him, and he always responded kindly. So, I guess we did express that when it mattered. Story 80. Only one. The other compensated for it. I was left feeling rejected, not accepted, and unloved by that one for years. It was hard. Story 81. Yes. It made me cynical and sarcastic. I live alone with cats. They are actually quite peaceful and nicer than people. Story 82. I am guessing anyone who grew up in the 1960s and 1970s experienced a similar low affection home. It was normal back then. My mother was very distant, but I knew she would do anything for us. She had untreated depression and grew up in poverty. You had to be tough back then. Story 83 gave me a perfect example of what not to become. I still love Dad because he stayed loyal despite not being loved, but he honestly dug his own grave by being a grumpy old man for half his life. Rest in peace, my favorite grumpy old man. Story 84. I would say that it made me a very closed person and not very inclined to show affection to those I care about. In fact, I do not like physical contact very much. Story 85. My mother left when I was 1 year old. She was an alcoholic and would appear randomly drunk to cause trouble. My father decided to leave his job and take care of my sister and me. He was terrible at it. My sister couldn't talk until she started school because my father did not speak to her. I could only talk because she spoke to me. My father would just watch television all day, was sometimes violent, and never taught us anything. He called me a coward for not going to my sister's school alone because she was being bullied. I was 10 and she was 13. We were never shown any kind of affection. I am in my 50s now. I have no friends, find any type of social interaction difficult, and usually upset people I meet. I get angry quickly and am very anxious. I drink a lot, usually binge drinking, then stop for a couple of weeks. I cannot hold a job for more than a couple of weeks due to paranoia. I think about suicide most days and have tried on a few occasions. I remember my first thoughts of this were around age 11. I have never been academically clever, but I am good at practical skills. I can pick up construction work easily, but my confidence started low and has now almost disappeared. I do not feel bitter about it when I think about it, but the impact it had completely changed what I could have been. Story 86. I remember my mother touching me one time when I was 19 or 20. For some reason, she tried to hug me, and I instinctively dodged. I do not like to be touched unless it is by a romantic partner. Then I am very physically affectionate. However, in situations where people say they like being touched, such as a hairdresser washing their hair, a massage therapist, or a physiotherapist touching them, I feel anxious. Story 87. They were not affectionate and were a bit physically abusive when I was a child, but became more affectionate when I reached my teenage years. When I was emotionally troubled, they dismissed it as trivial and petty. Crying always led to punishment, and even my brother mildly punished me because he found it annoying. I now find it hard to give genuine affection to others. It genuinely makes me cringe. Likewise, people saying nice things to me or giving me physical affection feels really strange, as if a part of me rejects it. Although I understand the importance of facing and owning my emotional problems, it may have made me more emotionally unavailable to everyone. Suppressing emotions ultimately leads to natural repression. I have developed a coping mechanism and am now trying to untangle myself privately. Story 88. My mom had parents who, while generally loving and kind, were not affectionate people due to their own life experiences. My mom says the first time she remembers her dad giving her a kiss or saying, "I love you," was on her wedding day. A mixture of this and being the second youngest of 9 children has manifested in a deep-seated self-consciousness and a desire to be liked and deemed good enough. She always does more than one person can reasonably handle and does not speak up for what she actually wants. She is incredibly kind and has been affectionate throughout our lives, but because of how her upbringing impacted her mentality, it also seems she has very specific expectations to live up to. Somehow, I really only feel this as I have gotten older. I am not sure if I was naive before or if it impacted me at younger ages more than I recall. I have an overall good relationship with her and my dad, but it definitely gets hard when things do not feel good enough because she has a perception of how things should be. This perception is rooted in her fear that it reflects on her and means she was not good enough, not really anything to do with me. Story 89. Clingy and obsessive with people who show little interest in me. Then they start wanting some space and everything slowly ends. Story 90. I am 30 years old and still trying to unlearn things. Hugging, saying I love you, saying please and thank you were all hard for me to do for the longest time because they were unfamiliar to me. I have trouble asking for help, and being around affectionate families makes me internally cringe, but at the same time I am very envious. Story 91. Grew up in a Japanese-German household where open displays of affection were very limited, but harsh criticism was strong. Anxiety-ridden and introverted, I still struggle to express my emotions openly during vulnerable moments with people. I automatically assume I am being judged for everything I say or do, and I unintentionally come across as serious with a resting, "I'm so done with life" face. In reality, I am a deeply empathetic man who truly cares and is sensitive overall. However, being raised in that type of household has made it very difficult to undo years of bottling up emotions. Story 92. If anything, it has made me very aware of being affectionate, knowing situations where I was deprived of this courtesy and allowing myself to be as affectionate as I can be regardless. I am constantly seeking affection as well. Oh, and alcoholism. Story 93. I had both. My mom was highly affectionate and emotional. My dad was emotionally cold and distant. As a result, I am able to navigate both routes. Sometimes emotional reactions are helpful, and sometimes emotions need to be set aside. I do not believe my dad had many negative effects on me. It is difficult to have him around when emotions require space. I think if both my parents were like him, it would have been very challenging for me. Story 94. I have a very hard time dealing with emotional matters and affection. I don't know how to properly process my emotions, and I tend to suppress them because I don't know how to be vulnerable either. As a child, vulnerability was always met with hostility and aggression, so I experience anxiety at the thought of being vulnerable with someone. I also struggle with giving and receiving affection, especially receiving it. I can usually show my affection by doing things for people or lending a hand whenever I can, but when I have to receive it from someone, I feel uncomfortable. Unlearning this has honestly been tough, and sometimes I find myself falling back into old habits. It also made me avoidant. Story 95. I physically recoil if someone tries to comfort me or touches me unexpectedly. Even if I care for them, if I have not initiated it, I go into a freeze response and feel suspicion. Story 96. I wish my dad didn't raise me to feel inferior to people. He's a great father, but his personality was basically, "I'm always right, so you listen to me and don't think for yourself because my knowledge will help you as a man. If you don't agree, you're not my son. Thanks for raising me to be a people pleaser with no boundaries." Fortunately, I grew out of that and no longer worry about it. Story 97. I sought physical comfort in the only way I knew how: sex. Since my early teens and have gotten myself into some risky situations. Story 98. Depression, alcoholism, addiction, and accepted domestic abuse. Thank God I am on the other side of all of that. Story 99. My parents were always fighting, but thankfully never physically. I think I saw them kiss like a light peck, maybe once. My love language is physical touch. I am always giving hugs, cheek kisses, and so on. Story 100. Anxiety, introverted, unaffectionate, avoidance of people, trust issues, depression, feeling unloved, emotional without tears, betrayal, backstabbed, black sheep feelings, brokenhearted. I reconnected with my biological parents in 2019. I asked my mother why she and my father were no longer together. I also asked my adopted father the same question. The answers were the same. Then came the horrible experiences with my ex of 2 years, which caused trauma twice. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.